Jerry, it's good to see you.
Good to see you, man.
It's been a minute.
I know, right? How's it been going on your end?
Ups and downs, like I feel like that's the nature of the beast. I feel like I'll tell you, I feel like September through to like now have been insanely busy. I've been on a lot of like booked independent shows and like getting out of town more often and just a whirlwind. But I feel like when I'm in that mode of constantly performing that I'm not writing as much because I'm so focused on like I want to deliver when I'm on like a book show.
Mm-hmm.
So like I might have like a tag or two that I can throw in, but I want to do, you want to do well with like the A material. And then I just find I'm not writing as much. So I've actually like going into December, I'm not doing any book shows. I'm just going to focus on writing and open micing and focusing on just like developing new stuff.
Okay. That's a good schedule to have, right? So the other thing is like you also have the day job, right?
I do.
So performing, doing the book shows, and then doing the day job is pretty exhausting.
Yes.
So it's like, where do you squeeze in your writing time then? So it's a matter of just like isolating time as somewhere, putting it on the calendar and like figuring out where you fit that in, because sometimes it's like there's only so many hours in a day.
Yeah, I think I bought a like a 3-month like whiteboard calendar so I can see in advance. But yeah, it's so funny that you said that. But yeah, I definitely need to get in the practice of better time management and like allocating time. With my day job is very much an ebb and flow kind of a thing. So like there are downtimes and then there are times where I'm really busy. Like but I feel like the busy has stayed busy for a long time. And so I can't just like wait for it to calm down. Like I need to start filling in the blanks. So yeah. I want to do a formal introduction for our viewers and listeners, if that's okay.
That's fine. Yeah. Let's do it formal.
Formal, yeah. Well, my guest today is a comedian, actor, writer, and educator. He's been doing stand-up comedy for over 30 years. He has written for The Tonight Show. I know that he's written jokes for pros like Chris Rock. He is the writer of the movie Stretch, and he is the founder and operator of the Stand-Up Comedy Clinic, and the author of what I think is the best stand-up comedy writing book ever written, which is Breaking Comedy's DNA. So
yes, you got my bribe.
Yeah, oh. I'd like to welcome Jerry Corley, the joke doctor Jerry Corley, to the Half-Hearted Podcast. So thanks for joining me.
The Half-Hearted Podcast. I love it. Yeah. Kind of describes my marriage.
Yeah, well, it kind of just describes my whole life. I just try a little. I got it from I think one of my favorite song lyrics is from Half of My Heart, John Mayer. I don't know if you've heard it, where he says half of my heart is a shotgun wedding to a girl with a paper ring. Half of my heart is the part of a man who's never loved anything. And I feel like that constant battle of like apathy and passion.
Yes, without a doubt. Right. Yeah, I know that. And that seems to be the way I approach relationships. Right. Whereas in my comedy writing and all that, I'm so 100% committed and in to the theories and the writing and the psychology and the neuroscience and what makes the brain tick, what makes the brain respond to stimuli that makes it laugh, that kind of like deep in, pulling back the layers in with this art form. And I think my relationships suffer as a result.
Well, and that was on some of my list of questions, so maybe we'll just dive in. And I hope this isn't like a too intrusive a question, but how many times have you been married?
I'm on my second marriage.
Okay.
Yeah.
For some reason, I thought it was like 3. But
yeah, well, I had a long relationship, which could have been a marriage, but we never got married. It was the smartest move I ever made.
Gotcha. Okay. So comedy is hard on relationships.
Yeah. sure it is. I mean, for me, it's there's no interest there's no there is an interest, but it's not like in my first marriage. I was so into building the career that I didn't, I built an office in my garage. I actually took half the garage, walled it off, did that whole thing. I mean, that's the first time I actually used the hypotenuse of a right triangle because I needed to extend the wall above 8 feet, which is the length of a 2x4. And I needed to frame that part in a triangle. It was a right triangle. I go, how long is that board got to be? Oh, that's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So I squared A, squared B, and did the square, bam, fit perfectly. I was like,
Yeah.
man, finally I was able to use that algebraic geometric formula to figure out the hypotenuse of a right triangle. But I built the office in there and I would spend almost all my time in there, my hermit time of being
Yeah.
in there writing and reaching out and setting up gigs. I had a phone system in there, computer, had the whole thing. It was my little office. And I would the TV, so I'd review, videos, comedy videos, and I was chasing the career, right? So, and I built a company. It was called Comics for Comics, where basically would get it was me and two other comics. We would set up college gigs for comics, and if we couldn't do them, we would hire other comics to do them and get a
Okay.
get a sort of commission back from. It was super busy,
Yeah.
and so I'd be in there day and night. And
Yeah.
the wife was like, and then she was actually working part time as my manager, and she booked me more weeks of work than my manager. So, but it was like I was on the road 43 weeks out of the year, and
Wow.
for 27 years. So I was like touring all the time, and that's hard on a marriage, right? So she decided she needed something else in her life. She needed our accountant. She actually, no shit, she married our accountant, which I found. I was like,
Married him.
yeah, wound up marrying him. Yeah.
That's a stab in the back.
Which really hurts because who am I going to find? I mean, he was, who am I going to, it's like, really, the thing is, you're like, it's your wife, right? And all of a sudden she's with your accountant. And I'm like, how am I ever going to find somebody else I can trust to do my taxes?
Well, here's the thing though. It's like, before I started doing comedy, I was unhappy in my day job. It's better now. Not that I wouldn't prefer to leave to be able to do comedy full time, but I was actually considering doing a vehicle wrapping business. Like, where you wrap them with the advertisements for the company, something like that. And I was talking to, another dad at the park who ran his own business. He's like, yeah, you start your own business, like say goodbye to your kids. And I'm thinking now that I'm doing comedy, it's just a different. I am gone all the time, but it's just a different business. And so when you were talking about comics for comics, if you were starting any business as an entrepreneur, it would take that amount of time from you.
Well, it was like what was great about it is what I really enjoy about doing the business that you're like. I love this. I love comedy, right? And be like, and I'm all in. I remember one time I was with a girl and we were together for a while, and she goes, Jerry, every single night you seem to you find time to get up on stage, but tonight you can't get it up from me. And I was like, oh shit, let me write that down. That's a joke, right? And it's like, so instead of
my kids will do that. Like, Daddy, are you writing that into your phone?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And it's like my current wife is like, you're always texting. I said, no, I'm not. I'm writing jokes. I'm writing jokes. What are you writing? Something you just said.
Yeah.
My wife was like, you can't do jokes about me anymore. So now I have a girlfriend.
That's right. Yeah. It's my wife. It's not my wife. It's my wife.
Yeah. So that's what I said. I said, comedy is my love. My wife is my mistress, that sort of thing. And it's like, no, I can't even do that because we haven't had sex in 9 years. So it's like, that's fine because I'm busy, right? I got shit to do. And it's like, I would say I work 16 or 14 to 18 hours a day. And I love it. So I'll be at the point where I'm like, oh shit, it's dark. What? How did it get to be 3 a.m? I should probably get a little sleep.
Yeah.
And because either writing or performing, I'm constantly working.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's something I wanted to ask you about was the fact that I feel like I only know you as Jerry, the joke doctor doing sessions, one-on-ones or doing like an a la carte class on a Monday afternoon. But what does like Jerry's the comics life look like? Because I know that one of the a la cartes that got delayed because you were held up doing a commercial. So like
Yes.
outside of the education part, like what does life look like for you?
Well, it really is, and with juggling everything. Like we missed the podcast last week because
Hmm.
I had a kid thing that I forgot about, and it went longer than I thought it was supposed to be. So it was like, uh, so the day is basically every night before I go to sleep is checking my calendar, what's on the
Hmm.
schedule for the next day, and then making the plans to be able to accommodate all the things on the schedule. I have an assistant that handles a lot of that stuff for me. Just got a social media manager to handle that part of it for me because I mean it was just too much to do. And then
Hmm.
so it's it's being on the phone with my agent, making sure I book out with my agent when I'm doing a comedy gig.
Hmm.
Most of my gigs that I do appearances, I do mic appearances in LA, but my real appearances are corporate gigs. So
Okay.
the corporate gigs are where the money is from. So it's like you don't really make a lot of money in LA doing stand up. It's more of they're showcase clubs mostly. But then I get out of town and I do corporate, stuff. And there are some in town, but a lot of stuff I've been doing lately, I've been transitioning a little bit to do corporate trainings where I'm training teams how to use humor when they're
Mm.
training. And I found out there's a lot of money in that. And they'll
Okay.
pay you a lot. Like one guy I coach who's an entrepreneur, he said, if you do one of these weekend workshops that you just did at LA, he attended one of my weekend workshops. If you do one of those for entrepreneurs, showing them how to build humor into their pitch, I guarantee you, I got 12 guys right now that'll pay you $10,000 for that weekend each.
Whoa. Yeah.
He said,
Nice.
I'll guarantee that. I'll make up a deal memo right now as long as you plan to implement it within the next 60 days.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's what I'm talking about. Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a lot of cash to come in for one weekend event. Right. So for
Yeah.
comics, I price low because comics don't have that kind of budget. These entrepreneurs who are very successful have that kind of budget, but they're not funny.
Yes.
They'll
Yeah.
they'll pay a price to really learn some of the simple tricks they can use to take a pitch and make it humorous. And
Hmm.
so they don't even have to do a laugh every 10 12 seconds. They can do, or 18 to 20 seconds, which is on average what they look for, a laugh every 18 to 20 seconds when you're trying to showcase for something for television. um, Whereas America's Got Talent, they look for a laugh every 10 to 12 seconds. So just so you know, anybody auditioning for America's Got Talent, that's what they're looking for.
Wow.
And the audition is 90 seconds long, and they're happening now, and then they happen again, I think, in January. So take a look at their website because if you're thinking to submit, now's the time. Um,
Yeah.
but so for those guys, I can give them tools um, for that type of event. So for a weekend, that'd be a 6 hour day each day, right? Training them. I got 12 entrepreneurs willing to pay $10,000 a ticket for that type of thing. They quoted the price. I didn't quote the price.
Yeah.
So I was like, money, I'm in for that. But I've had other entrepreneurs coming for those weekends who have spent the weekend learning these techniques for 2 days, and they're going, you should be charging way more for this course, dude. And these guys, but they're entrepreneurs, they're not
Hmm.
comedians. Some of the comedians are like, man, I had to scrape my pennies together to get this, right? And it's like just a different way they view money, had different relationships with money in their life. So, and I don't judge comics. I was there, I was broke and trying to figure it out. But now with this type of thing, tapping into that big market, and that happened first of all with Kaiser when I taught 200 doctors in the morning, 200 in the afternoon, in an hour session each, how to use humor in a clinic visit.
Hmm.
And they wrote me a big check for 40 grand for that for one Saturday. And I was like, And I found out this number based on the fact that they hired somebody else to do it, because they came to me and asked me if I could do it. I quoted them $5,000.
I remember this. I
Remember
remember
the
this.
story? And it's like, and then they hired some other guy who then came to me for coaching to show him how to do that. And he was arrogant, and he was unwilling to learn. He was unwilling to self-deprecate. He's like, yeah, I don't need to self-deprecate because I'm good at what I do. I said, well, you're working in front of doctors. You better let them feel superior. Superiority is a laughter trigger just for regular audiences. Now you're going to talk to doctors. You've got to make them feel superior. So
I've sorry to cut in though. It's just I wanted to ask though, do you miss doing the clubs?
I still do.
Okay.
Like I get out, a couple times a week in LA and do the clubs, and because it's important to stay connected. Sometimes three times a week, but mostly I'd say the corporates are where the dollars are. Right?
Sure. There's so many, and even in Toronto, there, I know a lot of comics who will do the corporate gigs, but they always talk about them negatively in terms of being a gig, in terms of like, it's just, you gotta be on the cleaner side, and they don't really laugh. Like they're, it's like something that management puts on and that they gotta sit through. And they always talk about.
My experience in corporates are usually pretty dynamic.
Okay.
And I think one of the reasons is when I get to a corporate, there's usually a dinner beforehand, and I'll sit at the table that's right downstage left, right? I already have this, like, if you're on the stage, it's right there. And I'll be like, I'm going to sit at this table. And then I just sit with them. Like when I get there, I'll walk up on the stage, just to look at the stage. They then look at me, and I look like I'm evaluating the stage, right? But they know I'm somebody. Mm-hmm. Then when I get off the stage and I go sit at the table, they go, "Are you the comic?" I'll be like, "Yes." And we start a conversation. I get to know everybody at that table. Mm-hmm. Then they become my go-to table when it's time for me, and when they introduce me, and they applaud the loudest. So that I get up on the stage. They're like, then the rest of the audience is thinking, he must be somebody. He knows Tom.
Yeah. He's right? Here for a reason.
So then that helps really kick it off. Meaning I'm already. So here's one thing that a lot of comics don't understand. The reason people go to these events is to feel accepted at a certain level, to be included somewhere in a group. So if we fail to create community right at the beginning, it could make or break that set. So it's like, that's why I established community at the beginning. And so when I go up there, I write like 5 minutes about them. And then the rest is my act, and they think the whole thing's about them. And plus I have this table I'm interacting with. And so everybody enjoys it. And usually those corporates, they're different than clubs because you can't be as cathartic, right? Mm-hmm. You do have to watch your language a little bit, because you got the boss sitting there or the CEO sitting there. But at the same time, I just did I just did a presentation at a high school where I dropped the F-bomb.
Yeah.
And I said, fuck that. You guys listen to this shit every day. Why am I going to hold back my language and give you a bunch of pretense? You don't want somebody up here trying to be fake. You want somebody up here being real. And if you really want to know about the comedy business, this is what the fuck it is.
Yes.
Right? And they're all like, yay, he's talking like he's one of us. That sort of, and they just had a great time. And they all start writing stuff down. I said, and the teacher was like, they haven't taken this many notes during a lecture.
Yeah. Well, hey, I feel that, because when I was I knew I wanted to start comedy. It would have been like May, April 2021, and I stumble, and I do the first thing I think of is how do I write jokes? I go to YouTube and search how to write jokes, and one of the videos I found was you talking to Joel Byers on the Hot Breath podcast. I think it was like an hour and a half, and I think 2 minutes in, I'm like, this is something different. And I grabbed my laptop and I took notes like I was in like a university lecture. And
that's good to know that I'm in my comedy, I'm more of a university lecture.
Well, more in the sense of like I was taking it that seriously, and the information you were providing was that valuable.
And that's the thing. Comedy is the most unexplored art form of all of our art forms, right? And I say this repeatedly because it is. And even comics today, knowing, there are hints of me out there on the internet, and they probably stumbled upon me and went, wait a second, that sounds like a lot of work. I don't want to do that.
Mm.
and then they sort of may tune out of that. Oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. You can't teach it, because Jerry Seinfeld says that, and many others say that you can't teach it, yet it is a skill set that you can absolutely learn and apply. You can develop timing. Timing is something that we all develop just in a conversation. If I say something, I look at you, you nod, then you're going to respond to me after you process what I say. That's timing. Timing is listening,
Hmm.
right? And so, I had this conversation with Seinfeld back in the day. He says, "Well, you can't teach comedy." I said, "Can you teach timing?" "Of course you can. People take acting classes all the time." I said, "You didn't, obviously." Um, so he
Yeah.
goes, "Touche." But he said, "Yeah." I said, "But you can take acting classes because acting is reacting. Reacting comes from listening. Timing is listening. That's all it
Hmm.
is. If you learn to get up there on stage and actually listen to how your audience is responding to you, then you develop your timing that way. Um, but all these guys that say you can't teach it, and then you watch them repeating the same patterns to get their laughs,
Mm.
and you're like, obviously you learned something. Maybe it's not in a classic formal setting, but you still learned something, So it's like when you really boil it down and you sort of distill down what it is that's actually what they're doing. All of a sudden you go, wait a second, here are these patterns that repeat themselves. Now, if I can, George Carlin said to me, if you could label all of those, it'll make it more teachable.
Hmm.
And
Well,
so that's what sent me into that room, that environment of sort of like labeling it and creating a kind of a theory behind it.
and if I recall, did you study under Greg Dean?
Greg Dean was my first teacher.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I picked up I just recently picked up his book, and I found that there were parts of it, like I could see where you developed like your reverse chart. It was like a development of his like story one, story two kind of approach to like misdirection, but far more specific. Like he has that what he calls the connector, and I feel like you went
Now
even
this is his
further.
revised book. Yeah. It
Yes,
came out
yeah.
after my book.
Oh, okay. So he revised
So
his
he
after you
had,
put
yeah,
out your book.
he had his first book, and then he came out with a revised book, and it was like loosely based on a lot of. So one of the things he taught me was set up an assumption, shatter the assumption.
Yes.
And it's like that was like, to me, that was it. But then he was like, I remember going back and seeing him, and that really resonated with me as far as reverse, right? And then I went back to, he had this like workshop, and the talent coordinator for David Letterman was going to be there, and so I said, I'm going to go to this workshop. That way, I'll meet the talent coordinator. And I saw Greg, and I said, the thing you taught me, shatter the assumption, create an assumption, shatter the assumption, was still resonates in my head today. And then he goes into this long diatribe of what it's evolved into, and I was like, well, you lost me, but it does, it kind of makes sense. And I said, so that was right in before I started writing my book. And I said, I'm going to write something that is more succinct and
Hmm.
deals not just with reverse, but all of the other structures that are being used out there. And so that's where I set my goal to do. And then he came in, he had a revised um, book that added some of these other things that we talk about today. And so, and yet there are like one of my students was in my class. Then she went to Greg Dean's class. And then she came back to me and said, the way he explained the reverse just flipped the switch in my brain. I said,
Hmm.
that's fantastic, because you don't learn to be a doctor from one instructor, right? So
Yeah.
it's like he's saying it from a different point of view. None of those points of view were invalid.
Hmm.
So it's like maybe one person gets more affected the way it's explained one way, and one person gets more affected the way it's explained another way. But either way, as long as you're learning this amazing craft, that's the benefit, right? So, but the thing that got me about Greg Dean was when I first started writing a book and doing a course, and I put that video online, which was the Tiger Woods video. I don't know if you saw that one, where it's like where I was basically a 45-minute YouTube video of me showing how to write a joke from a headline dealing
Oh,
with
that's
Tiger
right.
Woods.
And then you started like, and then you're listing things about golf.
Mm-hmm. So I do this, and Greg Dean calls me, and he says, "I'm going to sue you." I said, "For what?" He said, "That's mine. What's yours?" two dissimilar ideas converging. That's mine. That's from my book. I go, two dissimilar ideas converging. That's yours? Really? So you're older than I think, because the first person that came up with that very definition of a joke is Aristotle. And a
Yeah.
joke is two dissimilar ideas converging. That's the oldest definition of the joke that we have on record. And it's like, then it was recoined by a Scottish philosopher named James Beatty in like 1473. So it's like, well, you're fucking old.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's like, then you should sue me because I probably, but it was like, you can't patent a concept. If that was
No.
true, then Ford would be the only motor company because they invented the internal combustion engine.
Yes.
Ford and now Tesla, right? So, but it's like, why would you sue anybody? Why do you feel like, why? It's like, there are other teachers out there. There's a guy that's actually taken my 13 comedy structures and he's using it on an app that he has without citing me. So, and I know they're mine because there are nuanced names that nobody else has, like benign retaliation.
Well, that one, and that one is yours, is it not?
Yeah, that was mine.
Yeah.
So it's like, but anyway, it's like and it's like all you have to do is cite. Steve Martin in his class on his masterpiece class. You have that
master class.
Master classes. He has a stand-up class, and students were asking me, "Should I take that class?" I go, "Well, he's a legend, of course. He's going to give you some valuable insight somewhere." And then they came to me. They came to me. It's like, I wanted a refund. I go, why? When it comes to writing jokes, you know what he does? He sends us to your website. And they showed me on the video. I was like, oh shit, really? Steve Martin? Like one of my gods when I was coming up through this thing. He's referring to me. That's really humbling. But but anyway, needless to say, there are structures for everything in comedy.
Mm-hmm. Have you heard of a guy named Jared Voley?
Yes.
Have you? Okay. Because I feel like he took your reverse chart and even kind of evolved it. Have you seen his reverse chart?
No, he didn't have really a structure to his because he was out there before I was. And then also
in terms of comedy education?
Yeah, kind of comedy education. I was like, this is nothing. You're not giving anything. And so then I started putting stuff up, and then he started to go off of that too. So
yeah, because he has a reverse chart where it's because you have who, what, where, when, why, how going vertically, and he has it going horizontally, where in the setup you identify the explicit who, what, where, when, why, how, and then it's the implicit is where the opportunities are. But I find, I'll try between you, Greg Dean, and Jared Voley, I'll try all three. I'll run a setup through all three. And one of them will get me to where I'm trying to go, depending. Especially like if I'm like writing a roast, I like to run it through formulaically because I want them to be really succinct. I won last night, by the way. I did a roast. I won.
Well, that's awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah, roast battle Toronto. Yeah. Well, I like Jared Voley's approach because I almost call his like the advanced, because I feel like you can't really do his method unless you have a solid ground, which I feel like you offer in your book to spring from, because he's got the whole playfully inappropriate idea, which is like, after a setup, just say something playfully inappropriate. But I feel like you need to have an idea of like how to actually write jokes for that to coalesce and make sense.
Yes, and that's the thing. It's like one of the other methods I talk about is like, one of the two most common things we think about when we tell a story, and a joke is a story, right? Whether you're telling a joke or a story, it's all a story. It's like, so the 5 elements of story are character, theme, setting, plot, conflict. The two most perceptible when we see a story are character and setting. Who are we? Who's there? Where are we? So those are the two most obvious. And in this case, it'd be like if you had a situation. So which one, how can you change the perception of who we're talking about? One of the ways is to say, like when the joke of like, I got fired for getting my finger stuck in the dishwasher, right? Who we're talking about is a what, actually a dishwasher, but a what can also be a who in this case.
Yes.
And the dishwasher could be a person. So if you can, we're able to flip that the last second, I just got fired for getting my finger stuck in the dishwasher. And you said, I still don't know why they didn't fire her too.
Yeah.
Then you're changing
Yes.
what the perception or the image or the assumption of the dishwasher is. But you know the goal, right? So the goal
Mhm.
is, how can I change what? So the two most common things to think about when you're dealing about a who is gender, a man or a woman. So if I know what I'm doing before I start the joke, I can say, okay, what do men do? What's something that really would say something's a man? You know, muscular, tough, wife beater, lifting weights, always grunting at the gym, and making noise. So that's very masculine, manly, alpha male type stuff. So I can say, this happened to me today. I was like, I went to the gym. Somebody got on a machine right after me, raised the weight like 75 pounds, then like knocked out 10 reps like it was no problem. Normally, that wouldn't bother me, but that chick was pregnant. So
Yeah.
now I've changed it not only to who, but who with another perceptible disability when you're lifting weights would be pregnancy. So it's like that's a so you can change the who there. It's like or you say, I think of my boss as a father figure. What do you see? Who's the boss? The
Uh,
boss is a man,
as a
right?
guy, yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Father figure, of course, reinforces that on your subconscious brain. And you definitely draw a picture of some balding guy with a mustache or something like that. It's a very male character. So I think of my boss as the father figure. That just seems to piss her off, you know? So it's a very simple way of doing that. This guy sent me a text the other day and asked me if I could help him with a joke. And he's a lucha wrestler. They wear the mask.
Yeah.
And he basically sent me an idea that his idea was, I had this guy in a headlock. I was really pressing down on it. And then finally they asked me to leave the funeral. And I was like, nice. So what if we heated that up a little bit extra? It's like, and they know you're a wrestler at the beginning. Yeah, the other day had this guy in a headlock. So he's changing the setting, right? So
Yes.
it's in this case had this guy in a headlock, and it's like I had the Undertaker in a headlock, and I was like I was really pressing down, and finally they just kicked me out of that funeral. And it's like because evidently it's like the Undertaker was a real Undertaker, and that headlock just pissed her off.
I
So now we're changing because now we think of the Undertaker as male because the Undertaker character from the WWE is male. And so we see a male Undertaker, but he still never said the gender of the Undertaker. Can an Undertaker be female? Sure.
yeah.
They
Well,
probably do better makeup.
I love the I really love the using the three-way build for that to really point people in a certain direction. Like I wrote a joke the other day where I say I look like a guy who cheers for the Jays, the Raptors, and Islamophobia.
Like I'm one of those anomalies of society. I cheer
Yeah.
for the Raptors. I'm a typical Toronto person. I cheer for the Raptors, the Jays, and Islamophobia.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
right.
that's funny. Like
I
one of
got
my students had this joke. He's a black student in my class. He was talking about what the black people have contributed to culture and society. He said, like, black people have contributed a lot, like jazz, like blues. And I said, like Elvis. Because let's face it, if you know anything about Elvis, he stole a lot of songs from the black artists who couldn't get on the radio. And
Yes.
he went on the radio singing their songs and never really gave credit. And eventually went back and thanked some of them, but never gave them money, right, for
No.
their material. But the fact of the matter is that, he's now you have that three-way buildup there, and it's true and it's profound. So it's like, I love the three-way buildup. It establishes a nice pattern, you
Mhm.
know.
What led to you wanting to write Breaking Comedy's DNA to begin with?
There was a real lack. Well, I think part of it was George Carlin. Basically, when I met George Carlin, and he said, "I know with 98% accuracy a joke is going to get a laugh before I step on stage."
Mm.
And I said, "How do you know that?" And he said, "Because it contains all the elements necessary for a joke to get a laugh." And I went, "Oh shit, what are those elements?" He said,
Yes.
"You're gonna have to learn those on your own, kid."
Yeah.
And that was his defense mechanism. Then, after a glass of wine and a painkiller, which was his drug of choice at the time, he said, I think the reason I say that is intuitively I know what they are,
Mhm.
but I can't verbalize it. He
Yeah.
said, maybe you can explore this a little further and do what my dad did, who used to label everything. and organize it. He said that will help you keep track of this stuff because the patterns repeat themselves. You'll see the patterns just repeat themselves. There's this one pattern. He used the word paraprosdokian to
Okay.
talk about a reverse. Like it's very Groucho Marx. I've had a lovely evening. This wasn't one of them.
Yeah.
So that kind of like, and it's like changing the ending. Like Brian Kiley does that joke. It's like, I'm surprised my wife and I got together at all because when I first met her, she was so pregnant. And it's like, you're thinking beautiful, right? And then, all he did was originally take a line of what his real thought was when he first met his wife. She was out of his league because she was so beautiful. And he's like, what would be the opposite of that? Something you don't look for in a woman. And it was like pregnant. And he
Yeah.
plugged that in. All of a sudden, it was a great joke. So paraprosdokians are basically defined as left turn endings.
Okay.
And it's a literary device. So.
Yes. I wrote it. I tried to. I found a cliche. I so rarely do them, but they're so effective as the cliche reformation. I wrote one where I go if I have a particularly young crowd, I'll go, "What's going on, Gen Z? How's life in the bike lane?" And it like I'll get like sustained laughter just off that one line.
Yeah, that's good.
So if I recall correctly, you are revising Breaking Comedy's DNA. Is that?
Yeah, I'm doing a revision before I put it into hardback, right? And
Okay.
for a long time, I've had it in ebook format because in ebook format, you can provide links to examples of videos, and I can store those videos up on the cloud, and so they're always accessible so it becomes a mini course. So with the hardback book, they're going to be QR codes that people can now. It makes it interactive. And then the other thing I'm doing a new book that's going to be called sort of the Joke Writing Secrets Black Book. Okay. And I might actually retitle Breaking Comedy's DNA to call it like the 13 Formulas of Comedy.
Okay.
Because I think with the 7 Habits, that sort of thing, those numbers are marketing wise, they stand out. And so, and I want as many people as possible to be able to see this and go, wait a second, I can be humorous because no matter how much you learn, people say, well, you want to give away the secrets, man. It'll just make it more competitive. I said, no, it won't. All the secrets are out there from music theory, but only the people that work the hardest become the good musicians.
Jerry, I can tell you, there is not a single new comic in Toronto that I meet who I do not tell about your book. I feel like if you're selling a lot of books in Toronto, it's because of me. Good. But so few actually read it. Like that's the thing though. It's like, oh, you're putting the secrets out there, but it's like it's up to people to actually, 1, read the book, 2, study and apply them, and then 3, have their own, apply their own natural gifting to it, their own creativity to actually get something out of it. So I never I early on, I don't know if I ever told you this, but I told a guy about like the Corley, that's you. We call it the Corley book. He's just like, dude, it's like cheating. Like that's what he called it, but I'm just like, I think it's just like work.
I think a lot of people kind of have that notion, right? They think for some reason they have to scrape and toil, and like for some reason that means they're not paying their dues. Like when you go to acting class, you learn how to act for the camera, and they give you specific techniques to learn to act for the camera. I learned some specific techniques to learn how to read a cue card. There's these commercial types called industrials, right? Where it's a lot of dialogue, and it's basically used for either in-house commercials for industry or whatever. And it's like, or sometimes like with they call those little mini commercials, presentations that are on late at night. And it's like, they're just a lot of dialogue. And so I took a class where I learned how to use the cue card like it was the product. So when you look at it on the camera, it looks like I'm looking at the Toyota Tercel, and I'm looking at the beautiful rack and pinion steering and the stuff, and it's got this amazing texture and the drivetrain and meantime I'm just reading the lines and talking, and when you look at it on camera, you're like, oh shit, it doesn't even look, because when I first did it for a casting director, she was like, did you memorize all of this? I said, no, I'm looking at the cue card. And she looks at it again. She goes, oh, shit, because the way you set it up, it looked like you were looking at the truck, and my mind told me you were looking at a truck. Of course, we don't have a truck in this small space. We're just shooting it here. Oh my God, you tricked my brain.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's like, and she said, that's almost like cheating. And I was like, right?
Well, yeah, it's just work. Just applying it.
And it's like, if you know what the trick is, it makes it easier to write. But most guys are still hoping up there and just rambling and hoping it lands on something funny rather than knowing, oh, what I have here is the juxtaposition between, golf and sex. Or like with Chris Rock, the Chris Rock video is basically, he says, and he sets it up. He's like, man, there's a myth. It's called the stripper myth. You know what the stripper myth is? It's the stripper myth. And he says this so many times that people are now on the edge of their seat going, tell us what the stripper myth is. And the stripper myth is, I'm stripping to pay for college. There ain't no strippers in college. There ain't no clear heels in biology. I don't know anybody who's paying their tuition with $1 bills, right? And now if you list everything stripper, everything college, there's so much there you can juxtapose. She got straight A's with her double D's, look at D's, right? So it's like, yeah, there's so much you could do with that once you identify the two dissimilar ideas.
Well, and I have met so many comics who tell me they write on stage, and I wish I had that type of gifting. I wish that I had the wit to be able to just figure it out on stage, but like I started this at 38. Like I need to move up the ranks faster, and I don't have time to just hope I get something when I'm on stage, which is why I try to commit to writing. I wish I had that. Do you find that you're mostly just a writer, and sometimes I'll find like a tag or something on stage, but
yes, well, that comes from your work as writing, right? Because now you know where the tags come from because you've written them, and now you've trained your brain to identify them as you're writing. You know that you can have a tag and a topper being a joke, a second joke as a result of the original information in the setup, and a tag being an additional joke based on the new information presented in the punchline of the previous joke, of the joke. You can just tag it from there. So it's like tag and topper are two different terms, but mostly we just use them, together. They're either, it's people just say tag, and actually a topper and a tag are two different things. But you know that you can add this comment to it based on the information and get an extra laugh because it's available to you. Now, I love to leave my notes at home and get up on stage. I got 3 things I'm going to talk about and just save a night to do a rant. And the rant comes together. Sometimes the rant actually pays off more than the written material because it's so fresh, cathartic, because what's really playing here is a connection with the audience and their emotion. And it's like, I'll be talking about something and I've got a strong emotional point of view. So it's very Bill Burr in that sense. Let me correct myself. It's a very Patrice O'Neal in that sense, because you'll notice after 2011, when Patrice died, and Bill Burr in 2012, his whole that first special he did in 2012 was a whole different voice, and that voice was very inspired from Patrice O'Neal, who's really, really conversational and has an emotional commitment on his points of view. Bill Burr was totally, and he says this, I was very inspired by Patrice O'Neal, and it's like you could see the change in his act after Patrice died, that he really sort of, maybe Patrice is channeling through him now, right? So, but that's why Bill Burr's is all about a conversation with the audience. But from that, now that's how Bill Burr works, right? He has points that he's going to cover, and he gets up and talks about them. But first 5 to 7 years of his career, he was a 1- and 2-liner comic. And he says, self-admittedly, I had to know how to write a joke. So now when you're up there and I have a concept I'm going to talk about, as I'm talking about the concept, all of a sudden I see 2 dissimilar ideas converging. I can bring those 2 together. I can know his number 1 go-to, Bill Burr, analogy.
Yes.
Putting 2 dissimilar ideas together and then showing the coincidental connector between the 2. It's like saying my ex-wife, who's an alcoholic, is a lot like the signal on a smartphone. At any given time, I could usually find her at least 1 bar.
Yeah.
And people go, oh shit! Wow, I never thought about it the way. That's so true. My other ex, who cheated on me, she, having sex with her was a lot like working out on the weight bench at the gym. I know, I always have to wipe it down first. And I know a lot of guys were there before me. Right. So what a coincidence. I never thought about it that way. And that's all you're doing is finding the connector that's true for each and both at the same time.
How do you in if how do you create rolling laughter where it's like
Tags and toppers, tags and toppers,
just
tags
and just
toppers.
keep and just
Tags,
keep building.
toppers, act outs. Watch, man. It's like we did the a la carte for Patrice O'Neill on last Monday, and man, he goes in this one piece where he's just going with this moment, and they're laughing, and he's just doing an act out of a girlfriend who won't shut up. Right? She's like, isn't it better this way? Isn't it better? Is that don't you? Why do you have the curtains closed? You shouldn't open them. It's like bring the light in. Isn't that better? Isn't that better? Why are you eating this on the? I can make you a better sandwich. Oh, let me go make you a better sandwich. Isn't that better? Isn't that better? It's like, no, don't put your feet on the ottoman where you're comfortable. Just curl them up with me. Let's wrap up together like we're Twizzler. Isn't that better? Isn't that better? Here, put your arm over here. Put it over me. Put it over me. We'll cuddle as you watch your baseball game. Isn't that better? Isn't that better? And he keeps going on with this voice. And it gets to the point where the audience just applauds and cheers it because we've all felt that cloying kind of thing. Because he says most men don't want you to be near them, but they want you to be around.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like
yes. Men don't want to be alone. They want to be left alone, but they don't want to be alone.
They want you to be near them, something like that. And it's like, oh, they want you to be near or something nearby. And it's like it's such a good irony, right? And it's so profound and it's a paradox at the same time, right? Because we don't want you in our space. We like to be alone, but we want you to be around. We want you to be nearby. Right. And it's so true because it talks to the weakness of men at the same time as their need for their hermit time. And I said, man, that resonates with me so much because of the fact that I love to write and I don't like to be disturbed. And when I'm writing, and it's like, since I work from home a lot when I'm writing, I'll be right. I remember when my wife and I first got married, I'd be writing and I'd be at this part in the script. And I'd be like, okay, how do I make this turn work? So it's still plausible. This other character and this other character. It's like I'll be right in the headspace of okay. I said, and right when it's about to show up, she'd walk by and go, since you're not doing anything, could you take out the garbage? And I'd be like, oh man, you just shattered my whole that I've been working an hour on in my brain. But
your flow state gone.
The flow state gone. But now she gets that, and I just close my door. Like, so it's like, it seems like I'm disconnecting from everybody. And I didn't want to be that way. I want to still be open and available, be like the boss who leaves the door open, but it's like, no, I got to close that door because otherwise, they'll walk in right in the middle of a thought or something like that. Or me jerking off to porn, one of the things, which I don't do on my work computer.
No, of course not. Your work computer is your computer, Jerry.
Yeah. Actually, I have two computers that I use. I got the new Apple with the M2 chip.
Me too.
And it's like, oh, wow, what a difference.
It is the finest. I'm using it to record this podcast right now. It's like it's the first computer I've had where I don't have any complaints. It just works.
Mm-hmm.
There's no issues. I wanted to ask you, how much have you spent any time in Canada? Have you ever done comedy in Canada?
Yeah, I did a tour of Yuck Yucks way back in the day. Yeah. Okay. So I went through many of the Yuck Yucks up there, and I had a great time up there. So getting up there again would be, I have to make sure I'm still I'm no longer on the no-fly list.
Were you on a no-fly list?
Yeah. No, true story. Because during the Bush presidency, I was doing anti-Bush material. It was during the Gulf War II, and it was like my father-in-law actually said that because he was working at the State Department, he was the director of medical at the State Department, and we were going out there. I was going out there to meet them, and he basically had to do background to make sure he can take us on certain tours. And he said, Jerry, did you know you have a record? I said, no. I said, for what? Un-American activities. Un-American activities? What? Comedy. Yeah. That's not un-American. That's as American as you want to get. That's called First Amendment, right? But he said, but they were like, you were listed. And then when I tried to fly out of the country, I couldn't get out of the country because I was on a no-fly list.
And and is that, and it's still like, can you fly domestically or like,
I can fly domestically, but I can't fly internationally.
that's
So
wild. I didn't
yeah,
know
so
that.
and I've been, since the pandemic, I haven't gone, internationally, but I'm getting ready to, so I
Yeah.
better double check. I got a thing I'm doing down in Australia. I get invited out to Zimbabwe. I'll be doing something there. I'm going out to India to do something. So it's like, lots of people have been asking me to come out and speak
Hmm.
at their events, and so I'm excited to do that. Spread the word, man. But what's so interesting, that back to your point, where the people get the book and they don't implement it,
Yeah.
that's a big deal. And it's like, here's where most comedians, I think most artists or most entrepreneurs, if you will, fail, is they figure out what they need to get where they want to go. They research the obstacles. They try to overcome the obstacles. They implement a plan, and then and then step four, take action. That's where they fail, is take action. And so a lot of them, they get the book and they're like, oh wow, they maybe read the book and they go, wow, this is like cheating, and they're like, but it's also work. I can't. It's like the difference between great musicians and average musicians. Are the great musicians are practicing every single day, right?
Hmm.
My
Yes.
best friend, not best friend, but he was in high school. I consider him my best friend. He was a trumpet player, always good, always practicing. Now he's principal trumpet player for the New York Philharmonic. By basically relationship, by connection, he is the one of the best trumpet players in the world.
Hmm.
And it's like, I talked to him during the holiday. I said, how many hours a day do you practice? He goes, 5 to 6, unless I have a lesson, and and then it's usually 4. I said, and I was like, you still take lessons? He's like, every chance I can, because that's what keeps me the best trumpet player in the world.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I mean, and this is what I tell people, is that a lot of other comedians, it's like, it's not just about doing it for a long time. Like, I do think that there is something to, you will get better at doing comedy over time, but it's not, I think I'm going to be quoting you verbatim, but it's intentional practice with expert feedback.
Yes. And that I got actually from K. Anders Ericsson. And I think in the book Peak, right, he talks about,
Yes.
it's like two psychologists, Anderson and Dr. Robert Poole, were psychologists who invented the field of expertise or mastery. How do you become a master or an expert at anything? And it is like, Malcolm Gladwell said 10,000 hours of practice, or 10,000 hours, right? But he got that from those guys too, but he forgot the most important part: 10,000 hours of practice with expert feedback.
Hmm.
Because the more you can practice and practice and practice, and you can get real. If you're a basketball player and you're shooting and you keep practicing, you got 10,000 hours in, you could get practice 10,000 hours of shooting shitty, right?
Yes.
So if you don't learn to square that elbow, square up, plant your feet, get that arc on the ball, and learn to balance the hands so that you're in the middle of the ball, so it doesn't go right or left, and you find that place that's magical, and people go, oh, you can't really find that place all the time. Really? You ever see how close guitar strings are together? And these guys who play it and hit every one without looking at them, going
Yeah.
back and forth to the strings back and forth, and hitting each one, and rarely hitting a wrong note, but they're this close together. So that little slight adjustment, you can teach yourself to find that sweet spot. And it's the same thing with the basketball. So that, Chris Paul talks about that. He says, he was one of the best 3-point shooters in the league. And they were like, somebody, he was being interviewed, and she was like, if somebody says you have a gift, he goes, I hate when people say that, because it discounts all the hard work I put in, and the
Yeah.
practice, and the hours and hours. You ask anybody, anywhere. When I was in high school, I wasn't a good shooter. But
Hmm.
then I practiced and practiced and practiced with a good coach, and I became a better shooter, and a better coach. I became a better shooter, and I just practiced and practiced, practiced. Hey, what do you think now? Oh, your elbow's getting weak. You're dropping your arm. That's why your arc is not as good, right? And he's like, because you don't notice it because you're too close to it. And he would basically talk about the importance of having that coach, sort of like check him on some of the little tiny things that he was missing. There's golfers. That's why they have coaches. Tom Brady, you know, arguably the best quarterback of all time, right? 8 rings, I think he has, right?
Something
7 or
like
8
that.
rings. So and he takes 2-week break after the Super Bowl, or he took a 2-week break after the Super Bowl. Never took a break from his marriage, which is why he wanted to get a divorce. But here's another guy who was so into his passion that he neglected his family and his marriage, right?
Yeah.
So in this case, um, he 2 week break after the end of the season, back with his coach, training, 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 training. So he was ready for the spring warm up camp,
Hmm.
right? And so that's how he became one of the best, is that practice. And it's not, people say, I've been in this for 4 years. That means nothing. How many hours a day do you work on your comedy?
Yes. Yes.
What do you mean, man? It's like, when's the last time you wrote a joke? I don't know. I was like, I write when I'm up on stage. So 3 to 5 minutes a night,
Yeah.
not putting in a lot of time, bro.
Well, I guess an issue I've been having lately is I find that like I feel like I started with a really strong trajectory, thanks to you. Uh, and I find now that I feel a lot of pressure to do well, even at an open mic. And I found lately that it's almost been getting the better of me. And like how do you deal with pressure?
Well, I'll give you a quote. This came from a student of mine this morning. She's in Australia. She's a one of the only female Muslim comedians in the world, and she's Lebanese. But
Come to Toronto, buddy.
right, born and raised. Oh, really? Lots of them out there, huh? I
Oh
think.
yeah.
But she was one of the ones that
Fill the whole show.
she goes, I am at the point where she goes, I did this guy with one of their top performers in Australia. She said, I gigged with Nathan. He crushed. He did really good, but not as good as me the first night. Everybody was saying this to me, and she said the second night, I brought the house down, and that's when everybody was like, "Oh my God, you were the best." Even Nathan said that you were the best tonight by far. He said you killed it. He said, "What are you doing?" She says, because I realized I started to really make this impression when you're not trying to impress anyone.
Mm,
And I think that's a better way of putting it than I don't care, because of course you care. I'm not trying to impress anyone. And one of the things that has helped her is she's to me amazing as far as like the work ethic and deciding she needs to do something and doing it. When she was married and her husband ran a business and he wound up getting sued, and basically she said we owed $500,000 in a lawsuit. We didn't have $500,000.
mhm.
And so my husband's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And he got lazy and he just started pout and mope around the house. I said, I got to do something. We can't sit there and be in debt for the rest of our lives, $500,000. So she booked a flight to the States. She took a couple of my comedy classes while she was here, but a real reason for being here was to take these classes on how to make donuts. So she
Okay.
made donuts, went back to Sydney, and opened up donut shop and called it LA Donuts.
Okay. Yeah.
And she's now rich because LA Donuts is one of the biggest donut companies now in Sydney, Australia. She's now scaling and franchising,
Oh,
right?
that's
So she
amazing.
said, we paid off that debt. So we're debt free. And I divorced him. And I go, you are just the killer, because he was also restricting her going out and doing stage time.
Hmm.
Because he's Muslim and it's a tradition. The man runs the household, very patriarchal, and that's I can't argue with the culture and the tradition. That's up to them. But it's like at the same point, she wanted to go out and do clubs, and she couldn't because he was restricting her. Now and then she felt this freedom once she divorced him, this freedom. And
Hmm.
we work and we coach. And we've been doing it for on and off for several years. And then she'd go through these breaks. Now she's got people coming after her, agents, television shows, all this stuff that she's doing. And she's getting up on stage. She used to be afraid of doing act outs. She used to be intimidated to just be free and do whatever and stick to the script. Now she knows the script and she's just being cathartic with this audience. And she says, I just don't worry about impressing anybody anymore. I'm just there to speak my truth.
Hmm.
Either like it or you don't. You're going to love me, you're going to hate me. Basically, kind of like, in a way, Donald Trump of comedy, if you will,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
Trump gets up there not even concerned with what people think, and it's worked for him. So and I'm not a Trump supporter by any stretch of the imagination. He's an asshole, but there's also some things to learn from a guy like that.
Hmm.
And it's like one of those things is he just lets shit run off his back. He doesn't let it bother him. In private, he might be steaming, but in public, when he hits that rally podium, he's just present. Even he doesn't care what he says. It's
Yeah.
like
He doesn't even care if it's true. Just
that's right. I'm gonna march to the Capitol. Despite the fact it might land me in prison. Let's go.
uh, what excites you about doing comedy now?
Um,
I'm going to make that a two-parter too. And who's your favorite comic to watch now as well?
I would say I still like to watch. I love watching Bill Burr. Right, I
Mhm.
love Bill Burr just because he's so cathartic on stage, and watch him go through this evolution he's going through now that he has a daughter.
Mm.
Right, and watching him being introspective. He's also a guy. It's like remember I don't know if you remember I broke down did 11 minutes basically deconstructing 11 minutes of Bill Burr's act way back in the day. I've
Yes.
had it on my blog. And then somebody had tweeted him and he tweeted, including me in the handle and him in the handle. He read the blog, came back and he goes, hashtag horrific. And I said, hashtag not unexpected. So then a week later, I was at the Comedy Store in the main room and I was standing in the green room waiting to go on, sort of running through my ideas. And I was doing 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And I felt ready. In walks Bill Burr. And he goes, and then the MC says to me, Jerry Corley, you're next. So and so left, so you're next.
Okay.
And he goes, Jerry Corley, do you have a blog? And so he starts asking me why I would write this blog, right? And he boiled down to this. He said the thing that bothered me was like, whatever you were saying was making sense, but I didn't know what the fuck you were talking about because I don't know those labels.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
He said, but it, kind of made sense. I know these certain things work. I'm not sure what to call them,
Yes.
And it's like, oh, George Carlin had the same input, right? And so he was the one that told me to label this. And he said, oh, I got to know more. But we never spoke since then. And then I went up on stage. I'm like, oh shit, I better fucking gunsling.
Yeah.
I just had a conversation about comedy with Bill Burr, one of the guys I really admire. So I went out there and just made sure I was present with the audience, didn't worry about the materials, don't worry about impressing anybody, do your thing. And I just sort of like cut loose and had fun and made it very interactive.
Yes.
Because I knew that was going to be my saving grace, was to be able to stay interactive with this audience and not get in my head about doing material. So I had a really solid set. It crushed, right? And I hate saying that, but it did crush. I get done, he goes, nice set. And he gets out there and he's trying new shit. And it didn't work.
Yes. Okay.
So I'm struggling. And it's like, but I went out in the front and I watched because I wanted to watch Bill Burr work this.
Yeah.
Because you learn from that, right? I'm still going to learn from watching him work what's not working right now for him. And he got through it. It was good. Then I went back to the green room because I wanted to hear what he said. He goes, motherfucker. Like, we just have this fucking conversation. And I go out there and I eat shit. He's like, that's not what I want to do. I said, no, dude, that was the best because I got to see you, a person I really admire as a comic, work through an off night.
Yeah.
And I said, I learned more watching you do that than you watching you just kill all the way through.
Oh, and it's also just, it makes it feel a little less intimidating, right? Like, I think Pete Holmes put up like him doing like a 30-minute set. And I think he was like a year or two in or something and just bombing.
Yeah.
Bombing. And like, you realize, that, the people that we admire in this aren't perfect.
Right.
Right.
That's
like
right.
they have the same struggles too. Right. It's just, I just wish I could get there faster. But tell me what you think of this. I was inspired, and you may have even said to do something like this, but I was inspired by the Sylvester Stallone documentary where he said that when he was writing scripts early on, he would look at other people's scripts and then kind of use them as a guide, like not copy them, but just get the idea of, oh, this is where this scene needs to go, followed by this scene, and this is how the story arc of the character should go, using them as like a blueprint. And I heard another quote that made me realize that I need to kind of go back to basics in the sense of like the magic you're looking for is in what you're avoiding. And in the last 2 years, I feel like I've been actively like avoiding watching stand-up because it makes me feel insecure. And now I feel like
the thing is like, no, you're landing it right on the head. It's like Tony Robbins said, find somebody who's, want to be successful, find somebody who's successful at your specialty and copy them. Don't Carlos Mencia that shit. Don't steal their jokes, but look at the patterns. Look at the
Hmm.
patterns. Watch Jim Gaffigan. He is so meticulous at using the structure, the compare and contrast structure. Like, for example, he uses compare and contrast as a reverse. Like, he'll use the compare and contrast to make you lean into what you're expecting. So instead of using three, like a three-way buildup, he uses two. Like, for example, if I did a joke, my wife and I have incompatible sleeping arrangements. Like, she likes to sleep on her left side, and I like to sleep at my girlfriend's. Right. So
I have one like that. Can I tell you it? It's my wife and I like to role play. Like sometimes we'll go to a party and I'll pretend to be a fighter pilot and she'll pretend to be single.
yes, that's good too. Right. Now, where else can we, like, fighter pilot to what? Where would be the expectation? I like to be a fighter pilot. She likes to be a,
That would
like,
give the impression of that she likes to pretend to be a nurse or some sort of occupation.
right, some sort of occupation, which is good. And it does lean us into that. It really leans us into that choice of occupation. And then you go single. That's funny, right? So it's like you can do that with Zodiac. Like with the Zodiac, it's like I had to break up with my girlfriend. We just weren't compatible. I'm a Leo, and she was a bitch,
Yeah.
Or if I wanted to lighten it up, because I don't really like calling women bitches, and it's like, we couldn't, it just wasn't going to work. See, I'm a Leo, and she was married.
Yeah, yes.
So that could work too, right? So it's the same thing. It's like you're leaning into one thing or another, and you just like how can we, like, you can do that with up, down, in, out, the opposites, and have a great time building jokes using that technique. Jim Gaffigan, that's one of his main go-tos. In fact, if you watch his act, his whole thing is almost built on twos, not threes.
Yeah, well, I
It's
mean,
like
I watched your breakdown of him where he what was it? 45 jokes in 4 minutes,
yes,
something like
in
that?
5 minutes. And it was like, what was interesting for me, it was the first special, it was 22-minute special for Comedy Central. And in the first 5 minutes, you go, this was his core five. You could tell. This was
Yes.
the first 5 minutes he did. And I was like, it's so good and on point. And you learn so much in that 5 minutes that it's like, oh, wow, look what he's doing. Look at the trick he's using. I know, it's like, I'm originally from Indiana. I know what you're thinking. Indiana, mafia, right? And it's
Yeah.
like, that's not a new trope. That's an old trope. And I was like, I was telling my friend, I said, dude, he's like, you're from India. And you get up there and you say, I'm from India. It's like, I know what you might be thinking. India, world's best pizza. Of course, that's not what we're thinking. That's going to, and he's like, and he was like trying to be over clever with his comedy. He said, and I did
Yes.
that stupid joke you told me to do, and it killed.
Yeah.
He said, why does it kill? It's so simple. I said, it kills because it's easily consumable by a live audience.
Hmm.
Things move fast when you're doing live comedy, and they can't keep track of more than two or three ideas at the same time. It's just the limits of the brain. So when you actually give them two ideas and you were able to manipulate something with just two ideas, all of a sudden it's easy for them to process. Some of the simplest jokes are some of your biggest laughs because we over clever it. Because we think all the years we spent watching comedy, oh my God, these guys have to be so clever, so good to get these laughs. And you really analyze what the story is, what's going on. Simple. It's like the simple thing like you ever go to Disney, right? You go
Yeah.
to Disney, you ride that ride. It's a small world. You ever listen to the song? I mean, really listen to the song. It's a world of tears. It's a world of joy. It's a world of tears. It's a world of hope. It's a world of fears. Isn't this a song about being bipolar?
Yeah.
You can even reiterate and go joy, tears, hope, fears. Isn't this a song about being bipolar? It's simple, but it gets a laugh because, oh shit, I never thought about it that way. That's so true. And but if it's too clever, they can't process all of that information in time to get a good crisp laugh or shatter an assumption. And so it's like, that's one of those things. It's a balance. It's like comedy is like haiku. It's got a rhythm, and it's got, and want to speak about the rhythm. You want to learn something new? Did we ever cover this? Have you ever taken my class on vivid imagery, creating vivid imagery using three descriptors?
No.
Oh yeah, you'd love this, especially if you love to do the roast battles. You want to win the roast battle, three descriptors is your friend. It's like, for example, you've probably heard me do this. My 11-year-old asked me to tell her, Dad, how do you tell a joke? And I said, you tell a joke. How do I explain this to an 11-year-old? I said, tell me I look old without saying, Dad, you look old. And she said, Dad, you don't look old. You look like Father Time did karate on your face.
Oh, oh, it's funny that it's funny you say that, because one of my jokes last night was, uh, you look like the mom at Walmart who smacks her kid for picking the wrong Doritos.
Good. That's three descriptors. That's
Yeah. Okay.
maybe four, but that's fine. Like,
Yes.
watch Greg Giraldo. The reason why he is the best roast master of all time, three descriptors.
Three
Most
descriptors.
comedians they write lazy, and he uses three descriptors. He'll be like, Kathy Griffin, you look like Ronald McDonald fucked Lucille Ball's corpse and then threw it down the stairs. That's three
Yeah.
descriptors. And listen
Yeah.
to the rhythm. His like he was so ugly that his face could drop a donkey at 300 yards. Nobody, I don't even know
Yeah.
what that means, but people laugh at it because it's just got that rhythm. And years ago, Gene Parrott, who is my mentor, who is the head writer for Bob Hope for 20 years, 27 years. He was also wrote for Dean Martin Roasts. He wrote for a lot of shows, won several Emmys, one of the best joke writers in Hollywood.
He wrote a comedy writing book too, right?
Yes, comedy writing step by step. And it's like Gene Parrott, and then Melvin Helitzer, who wrote Comedy Writing Secrets, basically took Gene Parrott's book and broke it down to simpler terms, right?
Okay.
And then Greg Dean wrote his book, and it's like all of those books. Everybody who's learning comedy should have those books, because every one of them will give you a little tidbit that you could use and develop your skill set. And your idea is to become a maestro, not just a joke slinger. Is to understand what you're doing with your comedy, where you're getting your jokes, how to use tools and tricks to drop them in to keep that rolling thing happening. You get that because you're adding tags, toppers, incongruity, act outs, profound irony, paradox, wordplay, double entendre, simple truth, and it's like all building in, and three-way buildups. You know what's in there. So, and you know how to do that. I need something else here. Let me do a drop in the middle of the story. I need a cliche reformation. The two I like to go to when I need to build up a laugh point in a story is a cliche reformation. And a cliche reformation in my case is like, I like to use movie titles, book titles, song titles, things like that, not just cliches. So in this case, I might say, and I'll go through the whole story about my bad relationships. And then finally I said, but now I'm married. It's my longest relationship yet. And she's a little younger than I, but we've been married 16 years. So if you see a hot young thing walking behind me, that's not my wife, but she's probably stalking my wife on Facebook. But I think I have figured it out. I think I understand women now, which is an absurd statement, but I think I do in a way because I read that book. I read the book. Men are from Mars, women are from the mall. I read that book. Turns out Venus is the 40% off sale. Who knew? So in the storytelling, I needed a joke for been married with my wife. And I said, let me go with a cliche reformation. What is a book title, movie title that deals with relationships? And I came across Men Are From Mars, Women From the Mall. I said, oh, that's an easy one where people will create an expectation at the end. Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And it was a very popular book at the time. So I knew they would read the ending out and I could just shatter that ending, right? So Men Are From Mars, Women Are From the Mall, because Venus is a 40% offset. Women love shopping. My wife loved shopping at the time. So it really fits in nicely. So then years later, Bill Burr uses a cliche reformation. I'm dating this chick. She's a little aggressive. I don't know. She said she wants me to choke her. And I'm paraphrasing because I did this. I did an example on another podcast of Bill Burr and about talking about Oprah. And some guy wrote, he totally hacked Bill Burr's line. I go, dude, I was fucking paraphrasing. Have you ever watched Bill Burr? I mean, really watch Bill Burr? You'll never see him say the same joke the same way on any two given nights.
Yes.
So maybe I got it right, but just not the night you were watching him. So go fuck yourself with your stupid trolling comments, right? It's like, he says, she wants me to choke her. He was like, I don't even know. I'm not comfortable with that. Like, what's the PSI? What do I press? I don't know how. How do I do? I don't. And then she said, I want you to take me against my will. I'm like, what is this, 50 Shades of Rape?
Yeah.
So, of course, we're going to create that ending on 50 Shades of. And he just says, because he sets up the context, she wants him to be almost violent towards her. So it does kind of throw him off a little bit with that. And he uses the cliche reformation. So even he uses that. He wouldn't be able to tell you what it is.
Yes.
Right. And it's just as he said to me, I don't know what those labels are. I don't know what to call them. I just use them, but he uses them. Look at the people he hung out with, right? Rich Voss, Colin Quinn, Patrice O'Neill, Jeffrey Ross, all these guys that all hang out together and we're all on each other's shows. So
Mhm.
they had, and we're all part of the Comedy Central roast. Greg Giraldo, all those guys were all part of this group, and so they bantered and they used to get together and rank each other and sweat each other and like insult each other. Kevin Hart even talks about. He says, "Remember being on stage and I was bombing in Boston Comedy Club, and Patrice O'Neill threw a phone book on the stage. And like, well, we'll stop." On the stage, he goes, "Call one of those people, see if they think it's funny." So they used to like insult each other, but that also built their character
Yeah.
and their strength not to worry about so much about an audience, because shit, my friends are busting my balls harder than any audience member could ever bust my balls.
Yes.
So that helped them develop the chops to be up there and be able to put up with it. And I think that also the camaraderie of those guys probably helped Kevin Hart to sustain and stay through it, because he said, my first 8 years I was bombing. He said, somebody threw chicken at me one time I was on stage. And he said, and so you look at how he struggled when he first started, but he kept learning. He kept watching people like Patrice, kept watching people like Bill Burr, Rich Voss, Colin Quinn, all these guys who were doing it. And he learned from watching, and he got up there. So he was going to class.
Mhm.
It was just different comedy class. It was real. It was there, but he learned by taking their tropes, borrowing their patterns and using
Yes.
them for different subjects and topics. But the patterns repeat themselves, man. You know,
It's true, they do. We're at over an hour, and I just want to be respectful of your time.
I got 4 minutes,
You have well, no,
then
that's perfect.
I got a spot in Pasadena. So,
Uh,
but I am
is there?
so glad. But you need my text number, man. I thought you had it. We're texting each other,
I'm
aren't we?
I'm messaging you. I don't think so, but send it to me. You don't even have my comedy Instagram. You have my personal Instagram, like the one with my wife and kids on it that I don't share
my
with anyone.
my my social media manager called me and she's like, "You have the podcast with I said, "Yes, thanks for calling. I'm racing home right now to meet to be with Jay." So it's like she goes, "But I'm so glad that she called, because I was like, because Saturdays can get weird for me, and I've been anticipating this
Yes.
because I wanted to do this together, because I like spending time with you. You're a fun guy."
I appreciate it, man. I just I gotta get back out to an a la carte class, but yeah. Before I ask if there's anything that you want to promote, I just want to sincerely like thank you for what you do, not just what you've done, not just for me, but for comedy in general, because I feel that there is not a resource like the one that you've created, and yeah, it's invaluable.
And I've got more coming out, which will be great. So the thing, I'm just like standupcomedyclinic.com, all the classes are on there. And it's like, and right now, if you shoot me an email, I'll send you a discount code for the Black Friday sale. It's happening until Sunday night. So it's like 25% off all the classes, so they can get a discount getting into some, even like the 5-day intensive. We never discount that class. And it's
Mhm.
like the 2-day workshop going on in February. Then we have the book, of course, Breaking Comedy's DNA. And then I'm developing some new, like a 2-day workshop that's going to be online on demand. And instead of having it live, it's just me going through lessons, so it's nice and succinct, because you know how those a la cartes, we can sometimes get a little
Yes.
distracted, and it's like, and this keeps it nice and contained. And so just keep putting out content so people can learn and get up there and write jokes, man.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Well, have a great show later, and it was great seeing you, great talking to you, and we should do it again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime, Jay.
Okay, see you, Jerry.
See ya.
Bye bye.